Hey Michael, how you doing? So right now I'm finishing a commission my friend Lisa, who is in this painting. I'm using egg tempera, which is a traditional technique using egg yolk and white wine. For those of you who are just joining me right now, I'm painting using a traditional technique using egg yolk, which I cracked it open maybe an hour ago, and I mixed it with some white wine. And it's a traditional technique that was used for painting traditional icons, like this Byzantine icon that I learned how to paint at a workshop in Chicago this past fall. So in this technique, I'm using the egg yolk and white wine mixture to thin the colors. And here I'm using dry pigment, which I mix with the egg yolk and the white wine. So right now I am So right now I am basically deepening the shadows in this painting that I'm working on. I worked on the local colors in the last session, and now I'm just upping the contrast so you can read it better. And the way I'm doing that is I'm mixing ultramarine blue with a dark neutral brown, which is an oxide pigment. So that creates a deep black that is not quite black yet. So I'll further deepen the shadows as the closer I get to finishing this painting. So I'm doing it slowly so I can get the gradation I want. So this technique was used by Andrew Wyeth. So some of you are probably familiar with Andrew Wyatt's work. An American painter, a regionalist. He also painted with tempera, which is in opposition to the usual oil paint that artists use today, and acrylic. So the reason I'm going live right now is I'm trying to get myself comfortable delivering instruction by video. A lot of you are aware that I am on a quest to become a high school art teacher this fall. So I've been taking classes since January. And of course, since the crisis started, we've been having to meet online to resume videos. And this might be the reality that I'll be working in the fall. So I might have to do videos for the students to instruct them remotely. So I'm just trying to get used to talking to a camera while I'm painting and providing some information about what I'm doing. And as I get more comfortable, I'll actually be putting together some lessons that I'll be offering online and have in my portfolio for when I start interviewing to become an art teacher in the fall. So part of this is just getting used to hearing my own voice when I edit these videos. I've historically been very self-conscious about my own voice when I hear it on recordings. And singing every Sunday night, I'm used to hearing my own singing voice now. I'm just not used to hearing myself talk. I like the song and turn it up. And just keep on painting. So right now I'm listening to my favorite radio station here in Austin. It's called Coke FM. Thanks, Jidu. I see a bunch of you are watching from the Philippines. It's cool. So right now I am deepening the shadows here in the curtain. I'm taking care to really emphasize the folds by being linear about it. So I'm doing the more pigment where the folds are in shadow, and where it starts to project out, I add more of the egg mixture to make it more transparent. So as the egg cures, it creates some just really minor bumps here. So it creates troughs in which the color can start to pull up and yeah, so strategically having the liquid gather in certain spots to emphasize lines and texture. And as I'm doing this, I'm taking care not to scratch the previous layers because unlike acrylic, which is plastic and hardens quickly, egg actually takes a while for it to cure, to become permanent. But once it becomes fully cured, it is very permanent because it's one of the older techniques in use that has lasted a couple thousand years. Notice also that I'm painting on a rigid surface. This is called clayboard. It's a product that's made by a local company here in the Austin area. This surface is clay, which is mounted on a wooden panel. So the reason I'm doing that is egg tempera requires a rigid surface. Let me turn this down. So egg has a tendency to crack if it were put on a flexible surface. So you can see that demonstrated when you're trying to wash plastic plates as opposed to solid plates. So unlike oil, which is more flexible and can be on canvas, I need to be painting on a hard surface. Additionally, it needs to be a very smooth surface. So this is clayboard, and of the products by Ampersand, which is the company that makes this product, it's the smoothest. And the reason for that is so that the egg tempera can evenly go on the surface. And I'm creating the textures as I go along to create puddles of water and puddles of paint. All right. So I really like the song by Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson, so I'm going to turn it up and just concentrate on painting for a while. And again, and again, and again.
The Highwayman. From the Highwaymen, Waylon, Willie, Chris, Johnny Cash, and right now it's Tom Petty. Not got the singer, the song from Colby Cooper here on Texas Nights. Randall King on the way.
So Tom Petty is quite a figure actually among country musicians. They tend to adore him and his music. So there's a song about Tom Petty and just remembering a song by Tom Petty. Tom Petty. And Tom Petty. I got hair in that. We were free falling. And Tom Petty.
Episode in the continuing story of the Baloo News. Brought to you by Shiner Beer.
It's another New Music Friday, and today Pantelis has released her first album.
So the funny thing is, Rita Ballou is one of my friends on Facebook. I don't think she's watching right now, but that's her. She's a friend on Facebook. Talking here on Coke FM. Boom. So you, Rita, can you hear me? I'm listening to you right now. Sorry, I'm not really listening to you talking. I'm talking to myself.
Celebrities are stepping up to do their part in the battle against COVID-19, including Blake Shelton. He donated $150,000 for a... Hold on.
Is that all you got, Blake? 150 girl? Come on.
Yeah, Blake.
I would think he had a little more money than 150 G.
Well, you know, I'm sure he's spreading it around. He has donated $150,000 to the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma. Happy birthday to Fort Worth's Kelly Clarkson. And on this date, back in 1993, Sammy Kershaw hit #1 on the Billboard Country Albums chart with She Don't Know She's Beautiful. It wasn't the chart.
She don't know she's beautiful.
Sammy Kershaw hit #1 on the Billboard. I'm Ron Burgundy.
Just say he hit #1.
There you go.
There we go.
I'm Rita, and that is all the dirt that's fit to do.
Thanks, Rita.
Blue News brought to you by Shiner Beer.
There we go.
Beer for independent bands.
Yep, Rita's a friend on Facebook. We met one time with my dog at a show. Alright, let me turn this down. I'm going to talk a little bit more because I'm practicing how to paint and instruct at the same time. Because again, as a review, as many of you know, I am planning on becoming a high school art teacher, and so I've started taking classes this semester. And of course, since this crisis happened, the reality is we may have to keep on doing this, making videos for our students. And as I was saying earlier, I'm very used to hearing myself sing in recordings, but I'm still very self-conscious hearing myself talk in a normal voice. So this is a way for me to just get my feet wet so that it won't be so painful for me when I start editing actual videos of instruction. And I can see your comments actually from my phone, which I'm using to record this live. So feel free to ask me questions, and I'm going to try to look at the phone and just see if there are any questions that I need to be answering. Let me start. Mr. San Juan, how come unlike Bob Ross, who seems to be like a, I don't know, the Tasmanian devil on canvas, you're going very slowly? Answer from Mr. San Juan. Well, Bob Ross was using oil paint, which is more conducive to fast execution. It's a slow drying medium, and it's very forgiving actually. The thing with egg tempera, which is the technique I'm using, it's an older technique. It requires a lot of patience because it's a very temperamental medium, and that's why oil largely supplanted it in the 15th century. If I go too fast, there's a danger of me pulling away the paint that I've painted already on it. And I don't want that. I want my current layer to actually interact with the earlier colors I've laid down. So an example of me making that mistake of painting too fast. I don't know if you can see that. You can see how the green just really, I scratched away the green from the paint over there. I was painting way too fast. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to float the paint. So the more pigmented parts I put in the shadows, and then I use more of the egg and white wine mixture to create the transparency and soften the edges. And as I'm doing that, the egg is curing ever so slowly, and that creates ridges on the very smooth surface of the clay board. And that allows me to then build more layers within those troughs and create some kind of dimensionality. Travis Tritt. Very nice. Oh, Travis. Let's turn Travis up.
She stands on every corner and calls my name. Now won't you tell me if you can? It's life so hard to understand. Why's the rich man busy dancing while the poor man plays the band? Well, they're killing me. For killing me. Lord have mercy on that working man. Uncle Sam's got his hands in my pockets, and he helps himself each time he needs a dime. Them politicians treat me like a mushroom, 'cause they feed me full and keep me in the blind. Now won't you tell me if you can? 'Cause life's so hard to understand. Why's the rich
So as you can see, I had set up some highlights here in the curtain, but I need to tone it down, and I'm glazing this ultramarine blue with a brown, this oxide brown on top of that, to unify the surface more, so it reads as a curtain that is, it's got this mauve color in real life. And I would just want to keep enough of that highlight down here, so you get a variation.
St. Peter, look down for a minute and see this little babe about to drown. There's quicksand all around, and man, I'm in it. Please help me up, Lord, 'cause I'm going down. Now won't you tell me if you can, 'cause life's so hard to understand. Why's the rich man busy dancing while the poor man pays the man? Oh, they're killing me, all killing me. Lord have mercy on the working man.
Hey V, how are you doing? I don't know if you're still there, but I see you here on my screen. And just as a review, currently I'm painting using the traditional technique of egg tempera, which was used, of course, in medieval times. And most recently, I mean, there are current artists who still use it, but famously, Andrew Wyeth used this medium. And just as a review, the reason I'm going live right now, I'm doing this, is I'm practicing how to give instruction as I'm painting, as I am currently preparing to become a high school art teacher this fall.
The HCG diet has helped thousands lose weight quick, reset their metabolism, and gain more energy. It can all be done via telemedicine from your home. Schedule a free consultation now at naturalbiohealth.com. Make a change now. And decide naturalbiohealth.com. Chevrolet is making bad credit good during our Drive Easy event.
I had a 450 credit score, one repo, medical collections, and late student loan payments, and I still drove off in a new 2020 Trax for $355 a month. I got 10.9% for 72 months with only $2,100 down.
That's right. Hannah can put you in a brand new 2020 sedan, SUV, or truck today with approved credit. Find new roads during Hannah's Drive Easy event. HannahChevyAustin.com. Hannah Chevrolet is making good on bad credit during our Drive Easy event. I went to Hannah with a credit score of 474 with one.
So one thing you'll notice in egg tempera, as opposed to oil, for those of you who are familiar with the medium, with oil, alla prima is a thing where you can easily mix hues and values and create a smooth gradation and not worry about it drying too quickly. It dries almost as quickly as acrylic, and really it's about layering soft fields of color on top of each other to create the gradation that you want if you're going for that sort of realism. So looking at this painting, you'll notice that this is what I've been working on this evening. I'm deepening the shadows in this area, and eventually I'll deepen the shadows throughout the painting, but here is what it kind of looked like earlier. The shadows weren't as deep. So if y'all are familiar with early music, Renaissance music, viols as opposed to violins, to me, painting in egg tempera is like playing on viols. Viols have a very soft sound as opposed to a violin. A violin has a stronger attack. A viol, it takes a while for the sound to start making a sound. So it's a slower medium, if you will. So that's why I compare egg tempera to. I am building up the values as I'm going. If I get too deep, I can achieve a certain look by treating it like acrylic, and but really my intent here is to get it as soft as possible in the style of Andrew Wyeth. So something that looks like it could be done in oil, but it still has a nuance that only egg tempera could do. It's kind of hard to explain. So I'm actually going to switch here and play some viol music through Spotify. I normally listen to Texas Country on Coke FM. It's what gets me going when I paint. But my second favorite thing to play, and it'll tell me my early music friends here, but I love playing early music and listening to early music when I'm painting. So I'm going to switch here so I can demonstrate what a viol sounds like. Although I really love that song. So I'm going to play some bird. Let's do gibbons. And here we go. And of course I'm not paying for Spotify Premium, so I apologize in advance for the advertisements. So notice how the viol is a very soft sound as opposed to a violin or a cello or a viola. Looks like I need to add more pigment because the egg medium is now overpowering it and it's looking very transparent. Not enough punch. So again, to review how to actually mix paint using egg tempera, using dry pigment. So I'm using two different pigments here to make the shadows. So we have ultramarine blue, which of course at the time when egg tempera was used in the 14th century was a very expensive pigment. It was made from precious stones. It was called ultramarine because it was material that needed to be taken over the sea. Ultra meaning over, and marine meaning sea. So it was imported over the sea. So now, of course, it's synthetic and made with a chemical process. So it's considerably cheaper. And I'm using an oxide brown, which is basically made out of iron that's been oxidated. So it brings me to the point that the thing about egg tempera as opposed to oil, or even acrylic, surprisingly, is that egg tempera is very economical. So I maybe use not even a quarter teaspoon of dry pigment each day. And of course, egg is very cheap. I only have to crack open a new egg maybe every couple days at that. It goes a long way. So each of these are about $5. Compare that to a tube of oil paint, which could run to $50. So yeah, it's order of magnitude of 10. And that's part of the reason why I'm really exploring this medium of egg tempera. Okay, so now I remember what I'm doing. I am mixing new paint. So again, to get the paint from the dry pigment, what you can do is make sure you have a clean brush that does not have egg tempera in it. And just clean it with water, and then wipe off the excess water on your palette so it's just damp. So that creates enough of a stickiness for it to be able to pick up the pigment. Oh, it's not, you can't see it. So I'm using the damp brush, dipping it there. And then I put it on my palette. And again, I could use the same brush, clean it. Make sure to clean the brush in between. I'm going to be using the next pigment, which is the oxide brown. And now it's damp again, so then I can use that to then dip my brush in the well of dry pigment and put it right in the palette. And what I like doing before I mix in the egg tempera is actually putting some water in that, so that it's more manageable. So let me zoom in. So the black plus the ultramarine, we get a very deep hue. Or not a hue, deep value. Right now it's tending to the warm as opposed to the cool. And there we go. More pigment. And I actually might not need to add more egg in that because there's still some egg on the palette when I put that on the palette. So I'm going to test it out. How's it going, Tita Malou? Good to see you here. Practicing to be a teacher here, so I am practicing how to paint and give instruction at the same time. I'm not used to hearing my voice on video yet, so here I am. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type it in the comments, and I actually have the ability to watch what you're typing and answer in real time. So, using some more of the egg mixture. And for those of you just joining me right now, again, I'm painting using a traditional technique called egg tempera. It's paint made from egg yolk and white wine. So I learned this technique back in November when I learned how to paint this traditional icon using this very traditional medium. And Tita Malu, if you're still watching, I don't know if you can recognize Mom. That's Mom right there. I still have to fix her face. So this picture is from my birthday 2 years ago when we were visiting my friend Anne, who unfortunately passed away last summer. So this painting I'm going to give to Lisa, who took care of her at the end of her life. Lisa helped me a little bit with, actually quite a bit last summer when I went home to the Philippines to take care of Dad when he was in the hospital. So she contributed a little bit, what she could. So this painting is for her. Again, for those of you who are just joining me right now, I'm watching the comments for questions. I'm practicing to become a high school art teacher, and I know that this is likely going to be the reality in the fall, that I would need to provide instruction over video. Again, I'm taking care not to pull the previous layers of paint underneath because it hasn't fully cured yet. And that's why I'm going very slowly here. At least slower than I'm used to with oil and acrylic. And part of what I'm doing here is I'm trying to conceal the contour lines that I used to sketch out the composition using these shadows. And I laid out the composition using egg tempera with just black pigment, iron oxide pigment. And what that did is it created ridges, minuscule ridges on this very smooth surface that can then hold the paint in place as I paint, as I'm trying to work out the color composition. Hey Jordan. It's been a while, buddy. Loyola days. So I am going live right now, painting and practicing to become a high school art teacher. Just getting used to hearing my own voice and giving instruction as I paint. So feel free to ask me questions. I am monitoring the comment section. And I just made a mistake. I obliterated one of the highlights I set up. I could have put more of the egg mixture into the paint to make it more transparent, but I did not. I was not paying attention. But happy mistake. So I'm really happy how my mom's profile is starting to appear here. with the curtain being darkened. So I'm going to wait until the curtain dries up before I actually darken her hair. That way the puddles remain in their discrete places, and so there's more definition to her silhouette. Because if I start putting paint here on her hair, what's going to happen is the liquid's going to attract that liquid. So meanwhile, I can work on the frame here, taking care not to make it as dark as these, because I want to emphasize compositionally that this is secondary. So the frame here in the source image is secondary in the composition, so we don't want to bring too much attention to itself. And so the way I do that is to definitely thin the paint with more of the medium as opposed to the pigment.
Spring is here.
I think this is time for me to stop listening to Spotify.
The allergies.
Bye, Spotify. Back to the radio.
When she walks by, you don't know what to say. You're gonna make a move, you better make it now. Don't be afraid, 'cause love will show you how. You take that first step, ask her out, treat her like a lady. Second step, tell her she's the one you're dreaming of. First step, take her in your arms and never let her go. Don't you know, step by step, you will love. She looks too beautiful to touch, but your heart keeps talking to you now. Don't give up. You think you see something in her eyes, but you will never know until you try. But you gotta take that first step, ask her out, treat her like a lady.
So here in the frame, I'm trying to emphasize this corner and actually make it more transparent as I go toward the corner over here, because there is a lamp shining here in the actual space, and I think compositionally it draws your eye towards the figures here as opposed to the periphery of the composition. So it's quite opaque right now, this value I'm putting in. Again, I'm taking care not to lift the earlier layers, because otherwise, if I do that, that's what's going to happen. What happened here is I lifted my warm layers. I had an underpainting of green there, and I was too heavy-handed, and I had the bristles of the brush actually rub off the warm layers that I had put over that green. And so the technique I'm using right now is called floating, which is basically laying liquid paint on top of liquid paint and letting it float over the surface without scratching the surface. And for that to work, the paint needs to be quite liquid, but not too liquid that it's too runny and goes all over the place. So it's just really trying to find that balance. And to me, as I'm getting used to this technique, it's kind of like balancing on a bike. It becomes second nature, figuring out how much liquid needs to be in the paint itself.
I'll do everything I can to make you proud, to be my man. And I'll fulfill
Oh, I love Dolly.
all your fantasies. I guess we're promising a lot, but for now, it's all we've got. And I'll stand by you through our rocking years. Rocking chairs, rocking babies, rock-a-bye, rock-a-ages. Side by side, we'll be together always. And if you hold me tight when you love me, that's all I'll ask of you. And I'll stand by you through our rocking years.
So I'm seeing right now that actually I do want it to be a bit darker around here to define the contour of her face. So I'm going to build towards that.
And my heart,
So again, taking care for the paint not to dry with a hard edge over here. So I'm putting more of the egg mixture to soften it.
yes, I'll
And of course my brush is still loaded with pigment. So I want to remove some of that with my
be here.
paper towel.
I'll stand by you through our rocking years. Rocking chairs, rocking babies, rock-a-bye, rock-a-ages. Side by side, we'll be together always. And if you hold
So you can see that now it's quite soft there, so I can leave it be. But I'm going to actually continue that gradient all the way up there. But for now, I want to concentrate on this part, so I can further define her silhouette, just like with my mom over here.
rocking chairs, rocking babies, rock-a-bye,
Floating again, taking care not to pull the earlier layers.
we'll be together.
Because again, egg tempera and this technique that I'm using, it's like playing viols. You're really leaning on the slowness of the medium and the softness of it to build these layers.
Stand by you.
Another thing that I liken it to is playing the clavichord. If the clavichord is by nature a very soft instrument,
Delicious burger from Mighty Fine.
and the danger is, the temptation is to press too hard on the keys, and what that does is it actually ruins the strings temporarily, and we don't want that.
Now how about some fresh cut French fries or
It's
onion
too,
rings with that? Hey,
yeah.
order both of them. Top it off with a delicious hand-dipped milkshake made with Bluebell ice cream. Mighty Fine has options for you. Order at the counter for takeout, online, or call in for curbside pickup or delivered to you by DoorDash. Get your Mighty Fine
I like supporting local radio, and this is my favorite radio station here in Austin. It's Coke FM, which is of course legendary. Back in, I think it was in '60s and '70s when Willie Nelson and all the other outlaw country folks were played regularly on it. And they just recently revived it about 5 years ago. A friend of mine tipped me to it. I was just getting into Texas country at the time, and ever since I've been hooked.
From Slotsky's family to yours, we send love and well wishes. From our store, curbside and drive-through, to your car, we bring safely prepared sandwiches, salads, soups, and pizzas. From our oven to your doorstep, we deliver food you can count on for comfort. From the bottom of our hearts, we hope our fresh and familiar flavors fill your stomachs.
So another reason I'm doing this is because when I was student teaching back in right before, actually before the lockdown, I was for 2 weeks student teaching right before spring break. One thing I noticed was I was struggling demonstrating painting while talking and giving useful information as I'm doing it. So definitely I need practice, and that's what I'm trying to do right now. So thanks for being my guinea pigs.
Infrastructure and education. Respond online today to make America's tomorrow
And eventually I'll be making more focused videos on the step-by-step of painting. So I will be teaching watercolor. I'll be teaching egg tempera, how to make the paint, which I tried demonstrating earlier on Instagram, and that was a disaster, but you know what? I get to do it again.
Dang the sun, dang this day. I'm just trying to stay out of your dang way. The heck with this, heck with us. Shoot if I'd ever look back on where I've been. Shoot if I'd ever give away my heart again. Love this town, love this mother-loving truck that keeps breaking me down.
Ah, look at that. So the paint has actually started drying over there, and you can see it's starting to become powdery. So this just means I need to add more of the egg tempera in there. So I can use the dropper here, and there's still some of the egg mixture in there. And I might need to add more of the pigment. Oh, I love how that shadow makes the white over here, the silver over here, really pop out. So now I should take care to soften the gradient towards the light over here. So the way I do this, I just add more of the egg tempera, just without the pigment. So that way, this reads as a poster behind the glass. So there's a glare from the lamp that's over here. So that's quite heavily loaded with pigment.
Nurses, our doctors, our first responders, and
So I
every
need to thin
healthcare
that a
worker
little bit.
devoting every day to us. Thank you from your friends here on Austin, Texas Country, Coke FM.
FM.
I was a third-string dreamer on the second place.
Look comes.
But I was hell on wheels with a full head of steam.
I got to see him live at ACL Fest about maybe 5 years ago. I love this song. So this song actually features Eric Church of Springfield fame. Springsteen, not Springfield. To you, but does to me. So now I'm going to define a shadow behind the frame. So look how it's starting to look very three-dimensional. The frame is lifting off the wall now. So again, with egg tempera being a slow medium, I'm really taking advantage of just layering slowly and going layer by layer to build up values. And that's how I achieve realism in this medium. So this is the first layer, and I actually used ultramarine blue as one of the pigments. So what ultramarine blue is, it's the coldest color in my palette. So what it does is it makes the values really go dark, especially when mixed with a relatively warm neutral color like this oxide brown. So earlier I was building up values with, my darkest values were green plus red, and that created these grayer tones that are not as intense. And so with that as a base, I'm able to push things further when I'm trying to emphasize shadow. And I contrast that with the technique of using acrylic and oil, because of course they're less temperamental mediums, and the colors can be more intense more quickly without still be able to blend it. Here I can't really blend it. There's a danger again scratching the surface underneath. So it's definitely a different way of working. It allows me to slow down and just really think about the layers of the paint. And it creates this quality of wabi-sabi. It's a Japanese term about using imperfection as an aesthetic choice. So I'm really liking the character of the textures that is only possible with egg tempera. To me, it's like painting with wax almost. It feels... I mean, I've never painted with hot wax or with encaustic, but that's kind of what it reminds me of. To me, it's somewhere in between encaustic, watercolor, and acrylic. In terms of oil, I see some of its translucency that oil is capable of here in egg tempera. And of course, the organic quality of it. To me, there's just something about the fact that I'm painting using edible materials here. So again, egg tempera is basically just egg yolk, which I cracked about an hour or two ago. So you can still see the egg white there. So I separated the egg yolk from the egg white. And then I mixed that with some white wine. And the white wine thins the paint and also allows it to emulsify